My name is Michelle Adams. I'm 39 years old, and I thought family meant unconditional love until my mother looked up from carving the Thanksgiving turkey and said Michelle isn't even real family. What happened next proved that while I had spent my entire life believing I belonged, my mother had been planning to use my adoption as a weapon to steal my inheritance from the people she called her real children. Before I tell you how one cruel revelation at our family dinner table shattered everything I thought I knew about my identity, and how my father's words exposed a love so deep my mother had tried to hide it for decades, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how 3 words, every single week, silenced an entire room and made my family realize they had just witnessed the cruelest betrayal a mother could inflict on her child. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. I grew up as Michelle Adams in what I believed was a loving, traditional family in suburban Atlanta. My parents, Robert and Patricia Adams, had what seemed like a strong 42-year marriage, and I was the middle child between my older brother David, 41, and younger sister Jennifer, 36. Our family was close-knit and comfortable. Dad worked as a regional manager for a manufacturing company, and Mom was a part-time bookkeeper who managed our household with efficiency and attention to detail. We lived in a 4-bedroom house with a large backyard, where we spent summers having barbecues and family gatherings. Growing up, I never questioned my place in the family. I had Dad's brown eyes and Mom's stubborn streak, David's analytical mind and Jennifer's creativity. We all had different personalities and talents, but we seemed to fit together naturally as a family unit. I was always the responsible one, the child who kept track of everyone's schedules, remembered important dates, and tried to keep peace when family tensions arose. In school, I excelled academically and socially, eventually earning a degree in human resources and building a successful career in corporate management. As an adult, I maintained the closest relationship with my parents of all 3 children. David had moved to Denver after college and visited twice a year, usually for major holidays. Jennifer lived locally but was absorbed in her career as a graphic designer and her social life, visiting our parents maybe once a month. I, on the other hand, had made my parents a central part of my adult life. I called Dad every Tuesday and Thursday evening just to check in and see how they were doing. I visited every Sunday for dinner, bringing groceries and often cooking the meal myself when Mom seemed tired or stressed. When Dad had knee replacement surgery 3 years ago, I took vacation time to help with his recovery, driving him to physical therapy appointments and managing his medications. When Mom had a minor car accident last year, I handled all the insurance paperwork and helped her shop for a replacement vehicle. My involvement in their lives wasn't out of obligation. I genuinely enjoyed their company and felt grateful for the stable, loving childhood they had provided. They had always been supportive of my career goals, proud of my achievements, and interested in my life in ways that made me feel valued and appreciated. I had been married to my husband James for 8 years, and we had been trying to have children for the past 4 years without success. The fertility struggles had been emotionally and financially draining, but my parents had been incredibly supportive throughout the process, offering both emotional comfort and practical help. "You'll be wonderful parents when the time is right," Dad would tell me during our weekly phone calls. "Some of the best things in life are worth waiting for." Mom was equally encouraging, often sharing stories about how long it had taken her and Dad to have children, and reassuring me that persistence and patience would eventually pay off. "David didn't come along until we'd been married for 6 years, she would remind me, "and look how perfect our family turned out." These conversations made me feel supported and hopeful during a difficult time in my life. My parents' unwavering belief that James and I would eventually have children gave me strength to continue through the challenges of fertility treatments. This year, 2023, had been particularly difficult for James and me. We had gone through 2 failed IVF cycles, depleted our savings account, and were seriously considering whether to continue trying or explore other options like adoption. The emotional toll was enormous, and I found myself relying more heavily on my family's support than ever before. My Sunday dinners with my parents became a weekly refuge from the stress and disappointment of our fertility struggles. Mom and Dad seemed to understand how much I needed their encouragement during this difficult period, and they made extra efforts to include James and me in family activities and to ask thoughtful questions about our situation without being intrusive. When Thanksgiving approached this year, I was looking forward to the traditional family gathering more than usual. After months of medical appointments, hormone treatments, and emotional ups and downs, I needed the comfort of familiar traditions and unconditional family love. Our family Thanksgiving had followed the same pattern for over 20 years. We gathered at my parents' house at 2 p.m., with Mom cooking the turkey and traditional sides, while everyone else contributed appetizers, desserts, or wine. David would fly in from Denver with his wife Carol and their 2 children, ages 10 and 12. Jennifer would bring her latest boyfriend. This year it was Marcus, a photographer she'd been dating for about 6 months. James and I always brought the pumpkin and apple pies, along with a nice bottle of wine for Mom and Dad. We typically stayed late to help with cleanup, and often ended up playing board games or watching football with whoever remained after the initial dinner crowd departed. This year felt especially meaningful because David's family was staying for the entire weekend instead of just flying back Friday morning. It would be the longest time our whole family had been together in over 2 years. I spent the week before Thanksgiving making sure everything was perfect. I ordered the pies from Mom's favorite bakery, bought an expensive bottle of the wine Dad preferred, and even brought flowers to make the dinner table more festive. When James and I arrived at my parents' house Thursday afternoon, the familiar smells of roasted turkey and sage stuffing filled the air. Mom was in the kitchen wearing her traditional Thanksgiving apron, a gift I had given her years earlier that said grateful, thankful, blessed, in elegant script. Dad was in the living room with David, watching football and catching up on the past year's family news. David's children, Emma and Michael, were playing in the backyard with the neighbor's dog. Carol was helping Mom in the kitchen, and Jennifer had arrived early with Marcus, who was taking photos of the family preparations. Everything felt normal and warm and familiar. This was the family I had always known and loved, gathered in the house where I had grown up, maintaining traditions that connected us across the years and miles. "Michelle, can you help me set the table?" Mom called from the dining room, where she was arranging the good china and silver that only came out for major holidays. I spent the next hour helping with final preparations, arranging flowers, filling water glasses, and making sure everyone had appropriate seating. Mom seemed a bit tense, but I attributed that to the normal stress of hosting a large family dinner. At 3 p.m., we all gathered around the dining room table that had been the center of countless family celebrations throughout my life. Dad sat at the head of the table, as he always did, with Mom at the opposite end. The rest of us filled in the sides. David and Carol with their children, Jennifer and Marcus, and James and me. The table looked beautiful, laden with traditional dishes and surrounded by people I loved. Dad led us in saying grace, as he had done every Thanksgiving for as long as I could remember. "We're grateful for this food, for this family, and for the opportunity to be together," he said, his voice warm with genuine emotion. "We're thankful for the love that binds us and the traditions that keep us connected." As we started passing dishes around the table, conversation flowed easily. David updated us on his job and the kids' school activities. Jennifer talked about her latest design projects. James and I shared cautiously optimistic news about a new fertility specialist we'd started seeing. Mom seemed quieter than usual, but she was busy managing the meal service and making sure everyone had what they needed. I noticed she was drinking wine faster than normal, but holiday meals often meant relaxed rules about alcohol consumption. About halfway through dinner, as we were finishing the main course and preparing for dessert, Dad stood up to carve additional turkey for anyone who wanted seconds. "Let me help you with that," Mom said, standing up from her seat and walking toward the kitchen. "The electric knife is easier for the second round." Dad sat back down, and Mom returned with the electric carving knife, positioning herself at the side table, where the turkey was displayed on its platter. As she began carving additional slices, she started talking in a voice that was slightly too loud and too cheerful, the way people sometimes speak when they've had more wine than usual. "You know, this turkey reminds me of our first Thanksgiving as a family," Mom said, her voice carrying clearly through the dining room. "When we finally had all our children together. That was a long time ago," Dad replied, smiling at the memory. You were so nervous about cooking for David's first Thanksgiving. Well, David was our first real child, Mom continued, still carving. It took us so long to get pregnant, and then suddenly we had this perfect baby to make our family complete. David looked pleased by the reference to being their first real child, though the phrase struck me as oddly specific. Mom continued carving and talking, her voice taking on a strange quality that made everyone at the table start paying closer attention. And then Jennifer came along 3 years later, our beautiful surprise baby, our second real child to complete our perfect family. Jennifer smiled, though she also seemed puzzled by Mom's emphasis on real child. That's when Mom looked directly at me, the carving knife still in her hand, and said the words that would change everything. Michelle, you're adopted. My real children need this house more than you do. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the electric carving knife humming in Mom's hand. Everyone at the table froze. David and Carol stared at Mom in shock. Jennifer's face went pale. James reached for my hand under the table. Emma and Michael looked around in confusion, sensing that something terrible had just happened but not understanding what. I felt like the world had stopped spinning. The words didn't make sense. I was adopted? My real children? What was Mom talking about? Patricia, what are you saying? Dad's voice was sharp with alarm and confusion. Mom continued carving the turkey as if she had just commented on the weather, not dropped a bomb that destroyed her daughter's sense of identity. I'm saying that Michelle isn't really part of this family, she replied matter-of-factly. She was adopted when she was 6 months old. David and Jennifer are our real children, our biological children. They're the ones who should inherit the house and the family assets. I still couldn't speak. My brain was trying to process information that seemed impossible to be true. Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? Jennifer's voice was shaking. Why would you say something like that? Because it's true, Mom replied, finally setting down the carving knife and looking around the table. Michelle has never been our real daughter. She's adopted. David and Jennifer need to know that they're the legitimate heirs to everything your father and I have built. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Mom, even if that's true, how could you announce it like this? At Thanksgiving dinner? In front of everyone? When else was I supposed to tell her? Mom asked, as if the timing was perfectly reasonable. She needed to know the truth eventually. That's when the full implications of what Mom was saying began to sink in. This wasn't just about revealing my adoption. This was about inheritance, about money, about declaring that I didn't deserve the same consideration as David and Jennifer because I wasn't her real child. James squeezed my hand tighter. Michelle, are you okay? He whispered. I wasn't okay. I was sitting at my family's Thanksgiving table, surrounded by people I had loved and trusted my entire life, learning that my identity was a lie and that my mother considered me less deserving of love and inheritance because I was adopted. Dad's voice cut through the stunned silence, and it was filled with an anger I had never heard from him before. Patricia, what have you done? I told her the truth, Mom replied, defensive now. She deserved to know. The truth? Dad's voice was rising. The truth is that Michelle has been the most devoted daughter any parent could ask for. The truth is that she calls us twice a week, visits every Sunday, and has taken care of us through every crisis we've faced. Dad stood up, his face flushed with emotion. The truth is that Michelle is more family to us than David, who visits twice a year, or Jennifer, who only calls when she needs something. She's not our biological child, Mom insisted. That has to matter for something. That's when Dad said the words that would prove how deep his love for me really went. Michelle calls us every week, Patricia. Every single week for the past 15 years. When did David last call just to see how we were doing? When did Jennifer last bring groceries or cook dinner because she was worried about our health? Dad's voice was getting stronger, more passionate with each word. Michelle took vacation time to take care of me after my surgery. Michelle handled all the insurance paperwork when you had your accident. Michelle has been here for every crisis, every celebration, every ordinary Sunday when we just wanted company. He paused, looking directly at Mom. You want to talk about real family? Michelle is the daughter who shows up. She's the daughter who cares. She's the daughter who loves us, not because she has to, but because she chooses to. The room was completely silent except for Dad's voice, which was now filled with emotion. If you think adoption makes her less our daughter, then you don't understand what family really means. Mom's confident demeanor was starting to crack. She looked around the table and saw the horror and disgust on everyone's faces. I just thought David and Jennifer should know that they're the biological children, she said weakly. Why? Jennifer demanded, tears streaming down her face. Why does that matter? Michelle is my sister. She's always been my sister. Biology doesn't change that. David was shaking his head in disbelief. Mom, I can't believe you would do this to Michelle. She's been more of a daughter to you than I've been a son. And you chose Thanksgiving dinner to destroy her? Carol added, her voice filled with disgust. In front of her husband, in front of our children, in front of the whole family? Mom was looking increasingly defensive and desperate. I thought it was important for everyone to understand the family structure. The family structure? Dad's voice was now trembling with rage. The family structure is that Michelle is our daughter in every way that matters. She has been since the day we brought her home from the hospital. Dad looked at me, his eyes filled with love and regret. Michelle, I am so sorry. We should have told you about the adoption years ago, in a loving, private conversation. Not like this. Never like this. He turned back to Mom, his voice now ice cold. Patricia, you have just committed the cruelest act I've ever witnessed. You have betrayed the daughter who has loved us most faithfully for 39 years. I just wanted David and Jennifer to know their inheritance rights, Mom said, her voice getting smaller. Inheritance rights? Dad was incredulous. You think this is about money and property? You think we raised children for 39 years so we could give them houses and bank accounts? Dad walked over to where I was sitting, still frozen in shock, and put his hand on my shoulder. Michelle, you are my daughter. You have been my daughter since you were 6 months old. You will always be my daughter. Nothing your mother said changes that. He looked around the table at David and Jennifer. And if either of you thinks Michelle deserves less consideration because she was adopted, then you're not the children I thought I raised. David immediately stood up and walked over to me. Michelle, I'm so sorry this happened. You're my sister, period. End of discussion. Jennifer was crying openly now. Michelle, I love you. You've always been my big sister. Mom is wrong about everything. But the damage was done. In the space of 5 minutes, my entire understanding of my identity had been shattered. I wasn't who I thought I was. My mother didn't consider me her real daughter. My place in the family was being questioned based on biology I had never known about. James helped me up from the table. We're leaving, he said firmly. Michelle, please don't go, Dad pleaded. We need to talk about this. We need to explain. Not tonight, James replied. Michelle needs time to process this. As we gathered our coats and prepared to leave, Mom made one final comment that revealed the true depth of her cruelty. I hope when Michelle calms down, she'll understand that I was just being practical about family assets. That's when Dad did something I had never seen him do in 39 years. He raised his voice and completely lost his temper with Mom. Practical, he shouted. You destroyed our daughter on Thanksgiving because you were being practical? She's not our daughter, Mom shouted back. She's adopted. She is our daughter, Dad roared. She has been our daughter for 39 years, and if you can't see that, then you don't deserve to be her mother. James and I left while Dad and Mom were still shouting at each other, with David, Jennifer, and their families caught in the middle of the worst family crisis any of us had ever experienced. The drive home was silent. I couldn't speak, couldn't cry, couldn't process what had just happened. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my identity, my family, had been destroyed in 5 minutes by the woman who had raised me. When we got home, I finally broke down. The tears came in waves. Grief for the mother I thought I had, confusion about my identity, rage at the cruelty of how I had learned the truth, and terror about what this meant for my relationship with my family. James held me while I cried, not trying to fix anything or offer solutions, just providing the steady support I needed to begin processing the emotional devastation. Around 10 p.m., my phone started ringing. Dad was calling. Michelle, please let me explain, he said when I answered. Your mother was wrong about everything. The timing, the method, the message. All of it. Is it true? I asked. Am I adopted? Yes, Dad said quietly. We adopted you when you were 6 months old. But Michelle, You have been our daughter from that moment. You have been our beloved daughter for 39 years. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. We planned to tell you when you were older, but you seemed so happy and secure in the family. As the years went by, it felt like the adoption was just a legal detail, not the important part of your story. Dad's voice was filled with regret. We were wrong not to tell you. You deserve to know your story. But Michelle, the important part of your story isn't that you were adopted. The important part is that you were wanted, loved, and cherished from the moment you came into our lives. Mom doesn't seem to think I'm cherished, I said, the pain fresh and raw. Your mother is wrong, Dad said firmly. She's wrong about what makes someone family, wrong about the importance of biology versus love, and wrong about your place in our lives. He paused. Michelle, I need you to know something. When your mother said you weren't our real daughter, she was speaking for herself, not for me. You are my real daughter. You have always been my real daughter. Nothing will ever change that. Over the next few days, I learned more about my adoption story. My biological parents had been teenagers who weren't able to care for a baby. My parents had been trying to have children for 6 years and had finally decided to pursue adoption. The day we brought you home was the happiest day of our lives, Dad told me during one of our many phone conversations that week. You were this perfect, beautiful baby, and we felt like the luckiest people in the world. We always planned to tell you, but we wanted you to feel secure and loved first. And then, honestly, you seemed so much a part of our family that the adoption felt like ancient history. David called me several times that week to apologize and to make clear that Mom's comments about inheritance were not shared by him or Jennifer. Michelle, you're my sister, he said during one conversation. If Mom thinks I'm going to inherit more than you because I'm biological and you're adopted, she's completely wrong. Whatever Mom and Dad leave behind, it gets split 3 ways, period. Jennifer was even more emphatic. Michelle, what Mom did was evil. There's no other word for it. To announce your adoption like that, in front of everyone, and to tie it to inheritance, that was calculated cruelty. She paused. I've been thinking about it all week, and I think Mom planned this. I think she's been planning to use your adoption to justify giving you less inheritance, and she chose Thanksgiving dinner to make her announcement so that David and I would hear it and know we were the real children. The more I thought about it, the more Jennifer's analysis made sense. Mom's announcement hadn't been a spontaneous revelation. It had been a calculated attack designed to redefine my place in the family hierarchy. The most painful part was realizing that the woman who had raised me, who had claimed to love me for 39 years, had been capable of such deliberate cruelty. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Dad called with an update about Mom. Michelle, I need you to know that your mother and I are separating, he said quietly. What? I was shocked. My parents had been married for 42 years. I can't stay married to someone who would do what she did to you, Dad explained. What your mother revealed on Thanksgiving wasn't just about the adoption. It was about her fundamental character, and I don't like what I saw. Dad's voice was sad but determined. For 39 years, I watched you be the most loving, devoted daughter any parent could ask for. And your mother repaid that love by trying to use your adoption as a weapon to diminish your place in our family. He paused. I won't be married to someone who could do that to our daughter. The divorce proceedings took 6 months, during which the true scope of Mom's deception became clear. Dad discovered that Mom had been consulting with estate planning attorneys about how to structure their wills to give David and Jennifer larger inheritances because they were biological children. She had been planning the Thanksgiving announcement for months, timing it to coincide with David's visit so that both real children would hear the revelation simultaneously. Your mother had this all calculated. Dad told me when the divorce was finalized. She wanted to establish your adopted status in front of the whole family so that David and Jennifer would support her plan to give you a smaller inheritance. What she didn't count on was everyone being horrified by her cruelty instead of supportive of her logic. Today, 18 months later, my life has been fundamentally changed by that Thanksgiving dinner. My relationship with Dad is stronger than ever. We still talk twice a week, and I still visit regularly. If anything, our bond has deepened because we've been through this crisis together. You're my daughter, Michelle, he tells me regularly. You've always been my daughter, and you always will be my daughter. David and Jennifer have been incredibly supportive, making it clear that they consider me their full sister and that they're disgusted by Mom's attempt to use biology to divide the family. My relationship with Mom is effectively over. She has never apologized for the way she announced my adoption, or for trying to use it to justify inheritance discrimination. She maintains that she was just being practical about family assets. Dad ended up giving me copies of all my adoption paperwork, along with letters that my biological parents had written to be shared with me when I was older. Learning about my adoption from loving documentation, instead of cruel revelation, helped me process the information in a healthier way. The most surprising outcome was discovering that being adopted doesn't change anything fundamental about who I am or where I belong. I'm still the same person with the same relationships and the same love for the family that raised me. What changed was my understanding of Mom's character and my willingness to accept conditional love based on biology. The woman who learned she was adopted while her mother carved the Thanksgiving turkey learned that real family isn't about DNA. It's about showing up, caring consistently, and choosing love over convenience. Dad chose love. David and Jennifer chose love. Mom chose biology and inheritance planning over the daughter who had loved her faithfully for 39 years. The most painful family secrets aren't always about what happened in the past. Sometimes they're about what someone has been planning for your future. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been planning to betray you? How do you handle learning that conditional love was never really love at all? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family secrets, adoption revelations, and learning that biology doesn't determine who deserves your love.